So welcome to Legit Bad, everyone. Everybody in the live chat, hello to you. We see Janet and Kyle. Kyle, I'm wearing your shirt. Look, Kyle from the Big Dumb podcast. We just had them on too. Although he didn't get to say much because the Hatter was on a roll. If you haven't listened to that last episode, that was a crazy one. We had a great time with that guy. But thanks to the newest Patreon members, including Kyle from Big Dumb and Preston. Appreciate your patronage. I hope you enjoy your stay over there for as long as you do. We have
Preston Dennett?
no,
Oh.
no, another Preston. It's the he might be in the chat. It's Roids something. I can't remember the whole name. But,
Well, thank you guys.
Yeah, it's awesome. And also thank you to I believe his name was Eric, who just subscribed to our Rockfin channel too, and that's awesome.
Thank you, Eric.
Really helps us out. I think that's about it for housekeeping. If you're listening on audio, of course, all the shows live streamed can be found on Rockfin for free, and all of our back catalog Rockfin stuff is on there too. So, oh, and Upstate Nico's in the chat. We're gonna do a show with them too. Them also as well. There you go.
Get it out of the way now, Joe.
But if it's your first time listening, I'm Joe. Jen's with me, hello, aka the Blonde, and Ben, the finger eater / booger eater, is over there.
It's called chewing hands.
Chewing hands and eating boogers and picking your face and just being Ben. It's just
also fuck Jared.
Again, yeah. That's a callback from like months ago. Yeah, you got to have the classic opening the claw on the air. Fuck it, whatever. But we have Matt T from the Great Deception podcast on tonight to talk about the World's Fairs and how fucking weird those are. Because as soon as I heard about that, and we heard more about it from the Howdy Mikowski guy on OBDM, I'd never heard of that guy before, but after watching that show, I'm like, dude, we got to talk about that. And Matt's always posting stuff about Tartaria, Mudflood, and I think the World's Fairs kind of play into that a little bit at least. But Matt, introduce yourself. If people haven't listened yet, which I can't imagine, tell us about your show and yourself.
Yeah, Matt, I got the Great Deception podcast, which I started back in September, beginning of September. So been through a month now, got 6 episodes out, basically putting out one a week, variety of interviews and some deep dives that I do. So I like the best of both worlds, you know, and this is kind of like the crown jewel right now is the whole World's Fair Tartaria stuff. I mean, it's just huge right now, and I'm balls deep in it. So
Tartaria, so hot right now. Tartaria.
Oh yeah.
If you're going to be balls deep, it's a good one. It's a good bitch to be in.
You know, but the crazy thing about it is I started out like you guys. I heard about Howdy. And so I picked up his book. He's got this book called Exposing the Expositions. And because I'd never even heard of these things, right? I mean, growing up, I never heard about the World's Fairs or any of these, you know, Chicago buildings or any of these cities. And then you start looking into it. And Chicago's kind of the big one, at least in America, when we get into it. But they're in all these cities: Omaha, Nebraska, Buffalo, New York, Nashville, you know, and you start looking at the architecture and the story behind it, and you're just like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, how does...
And the newer ones, because there were some I saw from like the mid 20th century, but the ones that are real interesting are the ones from the late 1800s, right?
Yeah, because what happened is like in the, I want to say around the 1930s, right around there, right around, you know, between World War I and II, they went from what, you know, I consider the reset World Fairs to what is now the modern World Fairs, which is just promoting technology. You know, it's just in I think it was 1964, they had one in New York City where Disney was a big player in it. And like he was pushing, that's where he introduced everyone to It's a Small World, ironically.
The worst, you know, song ever.
Yes. Well, and the other, if you think about it, It's a Small World. It's like he's trying to tell you, you know, they're trapping us in that cage, right? And that's kind of what this whole World Fair exposition, I feel like, is that they showed you what we had before, and then they just took it away from us. You know, they just wiped everything out except for, and this is the funny thing about all these buildings that they build. And as we go through the different fairs, you'll see it's not like they built 1 or 2. Some of the fairs, they built 200 buildings in like 2 years. Now, I mean, just on that alone, I was like, what? How is that possible?
Well,
Well,
and the fact that it was that intricate and then they torched him afterwards makes zero sense.
yeah,
Why would you
and
torch it?
That was one of the first things when we were watching those documentaries that really stuck out was on top of them going through all of the ridiculously ornate buildings that you see around the world, arches, domes, things of that nature, that it's like all of those were supposed to be done within a couple years periods with hand tools, horses, and carts. That was the era in which they were. And the one building that I remember for, I believe it was the first World Fair in like 1860, very interesting decade, was that it was all of the glass. It was made out of all of the glass before they had automatic glass pressing, before they had any kind of automated hand tools, and it was supposedly built within like 6 or 7 years.
And that's the one I posted on.
And then they tore it down and rebuilt it somewhere else in an even shorter amount of time.
Well, you're giving them way too much time. And
oh, really?
You said 6 or 7 years. They say 9 months.
Oh, bullshit. Wasn't it like 25,000 square feet or something like that of nothing but metal and glass? And it was even like curved glass and shit.
Yeah. Actually, here, I'll share it right now.
Yeah, do it. Let's go.
Yeah. So we'll start here. And this is the World Exposition of 1851. And this is in London. Okay. So this is the building.
The one.
This is the building that Ben's talking about. Okay. And it's called the Crystal Palace. Yeah. And this was like the gold standard for the fair, right? Every fair has to have their show toy, right? And this was the one for this fair. Now, here, let me go down and here's, one interesting thing about it, it has the cross layout. Okay. And one of the things we're going to see with this layout is there's, think about a cathedral, right? It tends to have this similar layout. And one of the things that when we get into these buildings, they're not just buildings. They're, some of them are energy harnessing, they're frequency radiating, they're resonators, they're multi-purpose buildings. Okay. And so getting back to that, okay, this building that we're talking about, this 18 acres, it covered 990,000 square feet of exhibition space in this thing. Okay, it's 1,800 feet long and 450 feet wide. Okay, it had 3,300 iron columns, 10 million feet of glass. Now, mind you, this is 1851. How are they producing 10 million feet of glass?
In 9 months.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. 6 to 9 months is what they say.
That now, before, obviously, I'm not going to jump ahead here because I know exactly where you're going with this. The first thing that I remember thinking of is, like you said, we'll get into it later, the way that they made the buildings into transistors and stuff, and all of what we now consider very religious symbolism in things like the shape of the cross for the plan layout and so on and so forth. That's one of those, again, they didn't have aerial footage for anything that we're about to see. And yet everything with hand tools supposedly is perfectly symmetrical.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that. I was thinking the same thing for a while about the whole aerial view. And then all of a sudden, the other day, I was doing some research and airships came up. And the fact that they could have used airships potentially as like a drone and had it hover over and help them line things up. Now, I don't have a lot of research. Like I said, I just found this out the other day because I've been trying to figure this out too. Because when we start getting to some of the fairs and some of the, you can go a whole different podcast with like star forts and things like that.
Well, when you're, the star forts was another one with aerial footage when you're talking about, because all of that information was in a documentary that we all watched, but it obviously produces questions that you can't ask the narrator of the video, which I'm going to have a lot. I apologize in advance, and I'm going to try to let you explain it all. But yeah, when you say airships, are you talking about like hot air balloons, blimps?
Yeah, essentially like a Zeppelin.
Okay.
And one of the things that I'm finding during this is when you look at a lot of the pictures from the 1800s, the sky is white, right? It's almost like they blurred everything out. So anything that would have been in the sky is no longer part of the picture. And if you go into some of the actual pictures where they do show the sky or look into airships, you will see that they tended to dock on the tops of buildings. And so if they would white out the sky, they would take any idea that they had this technology from us, right? We wouldn't even know it really existed. So that's a whole nother rabbit hole I'm going to eventually get into, is the whole airships. And one of the things with that is, who has a monopoly on helium these days? It's NASA. NASA has a monopoly on helium for their quote unquote satellites, or satelloons, as you want to call them. And so you get into that, where airships is a whole nother thing. But that's one thing, Ben, that I found quite interesting, that I'm looking into now, is to see how were they so precise. Like you said, they don't have any way to look at this overhead. And you look at like some of the, ancient mounds, and the way that we're starting to see that these pyramids around the world all line up. There's more to it that I'll definitely have to dig into.
Nice. Yeah, and you can get into whatever you want, dude. If you want to get into star forts, it all ties together. So just you do your thing. You're the one that's smart. We're just here to learn.
Right.
Well, and it's kind of funny you say that, because as I started out with the World's Fair, right? That led me into these crystal palaces, which is, a long story short, there were 5 major ones, and all 5 burned down. So that's a whole, and we can go into all those if you want to eventually. But you have the World's Fair, you have the crystal palaces, you have the star forts, and the cathedrals. All of this architecture that is supposedly built in the 1800s, most of it, with technology that we don't think they had. And we have no way to verify how they did it, because there aren't many blueprints or construction photos. So it gets you into this thing that these 4 sets of architecture have a huge impact on where we were and where we are today. And that's kind of the mystery, I feel. And that's one of the things I'm doing, is I'm big into Tartaria and all that. And it's such a monster of a topic that I'm kind of working backwards. So I'm starting in like the late or early 1900s, late 1800s, and working back into the olden days to see, okay, what did they do recently to impact what was done previously? So, and this is what we're running into with the World's Fairs. And, you look at even this, I mean, this Crystal Palace, you look at it, they say it was, built in 6 to 9 months with like 2,000 men, I mean, and then you look inside, look at the detail on just this crystal fountain they had. This is pure crystal, mind you, here. And that was the centerpiece of this. And you look inside, and it's not like it's just it's intricate inside. So there's definitely more to this, the crystal palaces and all that stuff, and to the story that they tell you. I mean, you just look at the statues and everything, and this was built in 6 months. Now, like what you said, Ben, fair ended in 1851. In 1852 to 1854, supposedly they took this whole building down and built it again in a town called Sydenham, where it stayed until I believe it was the 1930s, when it finally mysteriously burnt down. So
how did that burn down?
How does it? There doesn't look like there's a lot of flammable material.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay. So here, one thing is, they did use some timber in the interior construction. So the exterior construction is all steel, the iron columns and the glass. Now, what they say as an excuse is that these things acted as greenhouses, right? So what they did is they dried out all of the material that would have been inside and made them extremely flammable. And then the story goes, you get like a clumsy errand boy that knocks over a candle and sets the whole thing over. Or in Chicago, one of the fairs, they blamed on a cow knocking over a candle. You get these ridiculous stories that just don't make sense. But, yeah. And the fact that all 5 of them burnt down, come on.
Well, yeah, and didn't they like demolish or like blow up a couple of the World's Fairs too, like actual dynamite?
Oh yeah, yeah. They paid well in the, I believe it was the St. Louis World Fair. It was either St. Louis or Buffalo, 1901 or 1904. They paid this company from Chicago to come down and blow up the buildings.
That's so weird. Is
So
that picture on the left there? By the way, people who are listening on audio, this is another good one to watch on video because there's a lot of cool pictures. Is that picture on the left an actual photo?
yes, this
Okay,
is
and then the
from the
one on the right's a
outside.
drawing.
Yeah, you can see the people down here, and let me.
Well, and isn't that one of the very rare only actual photos that they have of this particular building?
Yeah, there's a few of them, but there's not a lot.
That's an
And,
insane fucking building. Can you imagine if we had that now?
That's the thing. That's insane today.
yes.
If they used architectures and engineers to create this building, just the computer or just the paperwork alone to make a blueprint of that monstrosity would take way longer than they're saying that it took to build them.
Well,
Now,
that's
granted,
the ridiculous thing to me about the fact that it caught fire or supposedly burned down is that they were smart enough and had enough engineering prowess to build that, but not be like, oh, you know what? Maybe it's going to catch fire because it's like a greenhouse. I don't buy that.
Well, you know why he didn't have time is because he supposedly designed it in 10 days.
Right.
They gave him 10 days to design the Crystal Palace.
Oh, okay.
He must have been using AutoCAD or something.
Yeah, I mean, the story is just so ridiculous. And that's what, that's why I keep diving into it, because I'm hoping that through this, I'll find some answers, because the narrative that they present is just so asinine and it's just ridiculous. I mean, actually, this is a good time to transition over to New York. Okay. So we look at New York in 1853. All right. And this is their Crystal Palace. Okay. And this one is nearly as big. It was slightly smaller. It took up, how many acres did it take up? Well, this whole expo only took up 4 acres. Now, mind you, the Crystal Palace in the previous set of photos was 18 acres itself. So it's,
when they say 18 acres, is it talking about strictly ground level square footage, or does that count the upper deck?
That would just be the square ground level.
So with the upper deck, it's more like 36 acres.
Yeah, well, that's how you get to 990, almost 1 million square feet.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Real quick before we go any farther, for those of you guys that are in the chat, I know I just shouted out to you guys. I'll be posting the link for the documentary that I was talking about. Jen, Joe, you guys know exactly which one I'm talking about, the 5-hour one. He covers a lot of that in this. Obviously, we're limited on time, but we're going to get through much of it as we can, provide, as much as Matt wants to talk about. But I will post that link in the chat.
Oh yeah, you can post it. I'll probably put I'll probably put it in the show notes too.
Okay, go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, you look at, this is New York in 1853. Okay, again, a giant Crystal Palace, and then 1858, it just so happens to burn down. Go figure. Right. And ironically, you see a lot of photos of this, and the people are just watching it burn down. It was like a spectacle. And so one of the things I'm trying to dig into and make a conclusion on is that the whole purpose of these is a ritual, and there's some fire element or destruction element attached to it that's symbolic to them. And by them, I mean
or something.
Yeah, I can't figure it out yet. But
you mean kind of like Burning Man, where at the end of the little thing that they do it, they light the whole thing that's made out of wood on fire?
Yeah, something to that extent. Yeah, it's ceremonial, right? I mean, and there's other things too. There's in 2 separate fairs, one fair you had a president assassinated, in another fair you had the mayor assassinated. And the interesting thing about the one where the president was assassinated was President McKinley in Buffalo in 1901. He was assassinated. Now, right, he's assassinated in the Temple of Music, which I'll show you a picture of later, but he's assassinated in this building. What happens is they take the dome off the building. They save the dome off that building and move it to another building. And that's, one of those things where it seems like it's ritualistic. Like they killed the president in the building. They had to keep a memento of it. So they're going to just move the dome,
Yeah,
that's all.
and the reason's always, oh, it's a priceless artifact, or it was, we don't want to have to make it again. We'll just move it.
Yeah. So, yeah. And that's the, well, and that gets to another point with these whole fairs, right? Now, mind you, okay, so this is Philadelphia in 1876. This is their machinery building. Now, one of the things they want you to believe is that some of these buildings were permanent.
Are you showing us a different picture? Because I'm still seeing the Crystal Palace.
I was just about to ask that. We're still stuck on the two side-by-side pictures of the palace was taken down.
Really? Okay, so let me new share. Oh, that's why. Yep. And that's why you didn't see. Actually, let's do, okay.
Because I think there was a few slides there that we missed. Oh, yeah, there they are.
This is the New York, sorry, this is the New York Crystal Palace here. This is from 1853. And this was basically the whole fair. New York Fair was very small. It was the first to lose money, which is another thing you're going to see over and over again, is that these fairs lose money for the most part. So
I wonder why. Look at their fucking buildings.
Right? And the budgets are, it kind of makes sense. Like, all right, I get it, and trying to understand the money then to translate it now is also, it doesn't have the same weight. I mean, they're big numbers now, but think of it back then, right?
Well, but the thing to remember with this though is that it's just like going to any walkthrough fair at a civic center or something like that, where all the booths are set up. They're all spending their money, their time, their products to hopefully down the road get money from doing a fair like that. I would assume that, yeah, if they're making new buildings for these fairs, the city or whatever they had back then was going to lose money on the totality of the project. But what it would have done is it would have boosted the economy and the private sales for the people or the countries or so on and so forth that were there for the fair. So
like tourism. Yeah.
Right, exactly, like tourism. So in their mind, it may have been ceremonious to get rid of it because they're like, yeah, we just do this to boost the economy. We're going to lose money on it either way. So let's just burn it down and come up with a plan for another one. But I would be interested to see if they, still have it on record. I would be interested to see how the economies fluctuated before and after a World's Fair to see if there was kind of a pushback into the economy from these kind of exhibits.
Yeah, and my inclination would be no, right? Because
Really?
they destroyed everything that they would have came to see.
True.
Right? So you're building this whole elaborate landscape, and then immediately after the fair, you're destroying it. So there's nothing to come back to except for maybe a building or two buildings of the whole layout.
Interesting.
So and that gets us into, again, with these fairs, like you were saying, Ben, not only was it the country that was hosting, it was international. So you would get, anywhere from 40 to 50 international countries that would set up their own buildings.
Yeah, that one of the first, repainted, sketched out pictures that you showed. If you look on the left and right on the bottom row, it says India on one side, and then the other side said Persia.
Yes. Yeah, that was the layout for the Crystal Palace.
Yeah.
Yes. And and you'll see that all over. I mean, these things.
So they were huge. How did they get word out for that stuff? Other than horse and cart.
Well, there was like a whole committee for these things, right? It was like the Olympics.
Fair.
They would have, and even like, the Chicago was going against New York for the 1893 fair. And there was a bidding war back and forth. And it got between, like, I want to say Carnegie and Rockefeller, were the two guys fighting it out. So yeah, you start, and that's the thing, you start seeing the same old players come back into it. And the people that, we consider the, parasites are the ones who are directly intertwined with all these things too.
Well, and all of that ends up again, the more that I end up talking to special guests and we get on the subject, the more I'm like 1890, 1890, 1890. The more that I talk to Corey Hughes, even when we talked to Jeff the other night, we didn't really get into it, but all of these people end up promoting this very, big thing in the mid 1800s. And then around that time, when the kids of that generation were adults, shit started getting weird.
Yep. Well, and on top of all this, around this time frame, mid 1800s to early 1900s, they had these things called orphan trains, where they would just take trains full of kids, and in that time, in like a 50-year time frame, they moved 200,000 kids, orphans, supposedly. Now, A, where did all these orphans come from at that time? And B, why did they just ship them around? They just sent them to these things. And that's where you start seeing, if you think about it, the old like insane asylums and orphanages. They're just these old buildings. They just use the old buildings and claim they built them, or they were renovated or founded. They use all these quick terminology.
It's repopulating the earth from the last catastrophe. That's I mean, it makes sense, but my weird brain. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing too, like Ben was saying about the generation, right? It only takes one generation to change history, because if you can just train that one generation to think differently, they're going to then proceed it down the line, and that history is now changed forever.
Well, and then the next generation forgets, because it's, and it kind of carries on like that today too, where you're like, fuck the last generation, they suck, fuck you, boomer.
Yep.
We don't want to know about your generation. So it would probably be pretty easy to make people forget what actually happened. I mean, look at the last 50, or since the 50s, people generally don't even fucking know what happened during that time. The kids now, the kids these days, they don't really care. They don't give a shit what happened in Vietnam or anything. They're like, whatever you said happened, whatever.
They don't get the opportunity to know, though, because they're reading the history books that they're given.
Yes.
So that's super unfortunate.
Right there.
Yeah. They're reading that, and as people die out who knew what really happened, like, look at what's going to happen in our generation right now. We're looked at as blasphemous, anti-vaxxers, but really COVID was a pandemic, and that's what our children's children are going to learn about. And we lived through it and know it's fake, but they're going to learn about it a very different way.
It's his story, right?
Yep.
Or hers. I think they're both bad. So,
well,
I'm gender neutral on history or herstory. I think they both suck.
It's great.
I think what allowed it to pave that way, though, was talking about population fluctuation. And, considering that we're kind of getting into the Tartarian, it's one of those things where, just like smaller states, smaller countries, it's easier to keep a hold of that and all the rules and everything that you're setting for it, because you don't have the land size or the population size. Coming out of that time frame, it would have been a lot less people in really big cities, and they would have had the ability to all get together, which, again, if you want to think about World's Fair as maybe a way to do that, it's international, world leaders, this, that, and the other. They could have a way to say, from here on out, this is what we're going to teach. This is what we're not going to teach. This is what we're going to make history for the future generations. And with a reset, the lack of population would have actually aided that, because they would have been able to control, with all of those orphans that you were talking about, they would have been able to control the amount of information that got changed. And which is where I think that basically from that point on, they've been working on just, this is what your history is, to get away from whatever it is that they don't want us to know happened that led up to that moment.
I'm saying the early 1800s were the first MK Ultra. Go ahead, Jim.
I was just going to say that, isn't it interesting that they're trying to depopulate the planet right now for the next narrative?
Yeah.
That's definitely
coming. We are following the 1800s playbook right about now.
They're like, there are way too many people.
Right.
They have their own ideas. Let's get rid of some of these people, make it really small, maybe kill them all, just save the kids. And then we'll just plop them down all over the world, repopulate, and tell them exactly how they're supposed to be.
Yep. We'll teach them the narrative.
Right.
Exactly.
Like, think about this. Think about how terrifying this is. The only ones that haven't been okayed for vaccines are 12 and under.
Yep.
Which is terrifying if you think about, well, then why is it okay for adults? you know, which a lot of people have questioned, and I'm like, yeah, it's again, the numbers part of it doesn't lie. You're telling me that for however old the Earth is, up until 1900, there was only 1 billion people or less, and in 120 years, we jumped up to 8 billion. And of course, everybody wants to point to medical stuff, and I'm like, people were still living for thousands of years according to our history. Before that, there would have been more people, unless there were, and then that number changed 50 years or so before the turn of the century.
Yep. Yeah, there was definitely some population downplay that happened in the 1800s or late 1700s. It's somewhere between the mid 1600s and mid 1800s. There was something happened with the population shift. There was a drastic decline. And whether it was, you know, and that's what everybody's trying to figure out. Was it a mud flood? Was it an earthquake? Was it a comet? You know, what was it? What happened? Something happened. And that's what we're all trying to piece together here.
Well, mud definitely happened in my opinion, because there was a lot of it. So whatever caused that mud, whether that's when the Great Flood actually took place, was not very far in the past. It wasn't, 10,000 years ago. It was actually just a couple hundred years ago. Who knows? And what caused it? Did the firmament cave in for a minute and just let all the waters from space, because space is fake and gay? Who knows? We don't know what caused it, but I'm pretty sure there was a lot of mud.
Yeah, you could see it. And you see it in a lot of the buildings, right? A lot of the big buildings, you'll see the half windows on the lower level, or there's different levels to the architecture, right? That you can see distinction between it, where they added on or manipulated it. And yeah,
well, isn't there, I think I heard on Sam's show or on a tinfoil hat the other day, it might've been, I don't remember, but he was talking about how New York, since we're on New York right now, basically there's another New York underneath New York. Like there's like a sub level of New York, and everyone's just kind of like, oh yeah, it's always been there. It's like, how the fuck did they build that first in whatever year New York was built, and then they just decided to build on top of it and build more? Like, doesn't make sense.
It's supposedly the same with DC and London. They're supposedly, there's just as much land underneath as there is above, that's built out between tunnels and stuff like that. And that's an interesting thing you find with the star forts, is that 50% of it, about 50% of it's visible. The other 50% is all underground, whether it's tunnels, buildings, whatever it may be. And it's like, wow, how did they do that back then? And again, it gets back to the whole, what did they have? They had to have some sort of technology to do this that we don't know about.
Yeah. And that's what we're trying to find out here.
That's what we're digging into.
We rabbit trailed on you, though. I know you've got more slides, so go ahead.
And I can go on for days on all this stuff.
So can we.
I just want to show you some of the other fairs around the U.S. and you start seeing some of the similarities in the architecture and just the vastness of it, right? I mean, this is Philadelphia in 1876. The building is enormous. I mean, it's just a monstrosity.
That's an actual photo too, huh?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And what you look at is you see the nice arched windows. You'll always see these, what look like antennas or spires coming off of the building, which
the crosses for Jesus, man. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Or the crescent moon. But you see even the designs, you'll see the intricacy of it. Everything is uniform. Everything is in line there. It's just perfect.
But they couldn't figure out how to get around besides a horse and a carriage.
Exactly.
Not buying it.
Yeah, it doesn't add up. And so this is the layout of Philadelphia, just to give you an understanding of it, of what they did. And, you just look at these huge buildings here down the side of this. I mean, they're a couple acres each. You're looking at probably 10 acres each there. I mean, it's amazing. And this is the women's pavilion there. Again, you look at the intricacy of the architecture between the domed roof, the spires, and all the intricate detail. It's mind-blowing, and to all be destroyed. Now, mind you, here's the other thing they try and sell us on, that the majority of these buildings that they built were built out of like staff, which is the equivalent of like plaster Paris, right? I mean, they're saying that they just put up a wood frame and covered it with plaster. And you look at the detail and you're like, there's no way that's possible. Okay, so this is an interesting one. Here's Nashville in 1897. Joe, I actually sent you this picture the other day.
Yeah, I commented on your post of it. It looks like a Solomon's Temple architecture on the inside, at least.
Or the Parthenon, right? It's almost an identical layout to the Parthenon. And then you look down over here, what else do you see? Oh, they had a pyramid too. And, you start thinking about Tennessee and you're like, wow, that's kind of a random spot for it. But
that's a photo I haven't seen of that, which I don't find coincidental. I mean, you'd have to be looking specifically this building to pull up these pictures, but I've never seen the one with the pyramid next to it.
Yeah. And that was just for the fair. The pyramid was eventually moved to Memphis and is still there today, supposedly. But the thing with these is that what you start seeing is replicas of Italian, Roman, Egyptian architecture, even Moorish, right? I mean, you look at a lot of the Russian architectures, has a lot of roots in the Moorish style. They're all in America. And they're all in America at a time when we're told we were horse and buggy, no electricity, no plumbing, but we can build these massive palatial things. So you look at this for Nashville, and this is an interesting one. I mean, just look at the layout here. So the Parthenon wasn't the only big building, right? I mean, they have all of these other enormous, beautiful buildings around the perimeter. And of course, they have beautiful landscaping, and it's all done in 2 years.
And it looks so much better than the dog shit they build now with these big square buildings with glass and steel and people shitting on the sidewalk in San Francisco. Like, and they say we're more advanced now. Like, look at that. That is wildly more advanced than we are now.
Well, they didn't have Facebook or Instagram or any socials back in the day. So they had a lot of time. Like, talk about being married to your job. They had a lot of time.
Well, and again, look at how many pyramids there are. I lost count. Like, if you really look at the photo, they're all over the place.
Yeah, there's one here.
Yep, that one's the first one I saw. And then if you go directly south of that, past the building, right underneath of it.
Yes.
Yep, there's another one, and I spotted several more.
Ben's got better eyes than me. I'm like, huh?
Yeah, I haven't even seen it. I think there's one here too, Ben. Yeah.
And then there's also one of the left in between the two buildings on the far left. Up from there. Right there in between the two main buildings. There's a pyramid.
This is an audio show too.
I know.
Yeah.
It's not Where's Waldo, dude. What the fuck?
Sorry for the audio people.
Yeah, this is a brutal one for audio people. I apologize.
No, it's fine. They'll just come over here and watch this video. It's fine.
Yeah, so we come now. This is an interesting one. Is Buffalo in 1901? Look at this. This is the main. This is Buffalo, New York, mind you. So I never knew about this. I don't know about anybody else, but I mean, this looks like Rome or Italy back then. It's just, and then now here's
to make me think that the Roman Empire fell a couple hundred years ago and not 1,000 years ago.
Or what if here's another one I've been throwing. What if the Roman Empire was really in America?
Oh shit.
That's one that they're saying now. What if Rome, Egypt, and Italy and not Italy, Rome, Egypt. What was the other one?
Well, maybe the whole world was the Roman Empire and that was also Tartaria, or who knows? It's hard to know what to believe, but the architecture is so similar to Rome, and Rome is supposedly, what is it, 1,000 years old at least? Couple thousand, I guess. But maybe to find the same architecture over here in the 1800s is very fucking strange.
Yeah. Well, and then to add to the strangeness, look at this. This is 1901 in Buffalo. The buildings are lit up like New York City. But we didn't have electricity, not to this extent yet.
We didn't have a grid then.
Nope. And this tower here also had a huge spotlight on the top, or a bunch of spotlights that would come off and reflect on other buildings too.
Oh, I've seen
And
those pictures. Yeah, I didn't even know that was an actual picture, but it looks
yeah,
crazy.
actually here, it's right here. It's this one right here. So if
Oh,
we look
yep,
at
that one. Is that
that, I
so?
mean,
That's an actual photo too.
yeah. So I mean,
What
you
the
just look
hell?
at these buildings. This was their electricity building, and also what they had in this thing was an elevator that you could take to the top and view the entire fair from up there. And this was an elevator at a time. It's one of the first elevators that was built was for this fair.
It looks like an early
Can you
Las
imagine
Vegas.
getting on that elevator? I'd be like, okay, we're about to die for sure.
Well,
No, it
I feel like
was
the
probably an
scariest thing ever.
anti-gravity elevator. It wasn't this rope and pulley bullshit we have now.
but that's a great point, Jen. Think about it. If now, mind you, who's coming to these fairs? It's not the regular, me and you, we couldn't afford to go there. This was, rich people. It was the elites. This was like a big gala for them. Would they allow buildings to be constructed that could fall apart under their feet if it was built, with staff, like they say, wood and staff? They claim this tower right here is not built out of, bricks. This is supposedly a wooden structure. So, I mean, and you're telling me, like you just said, Jen, you're going to take an elevator up there, being the first one? Get out of here. I can't buy that
Right.
story.
No,
for
they
one.
they knew exactly what they were getting into. They were like, okay, this shit's totally fine. Everything's very solid. It's all something completely different than what everyone else thinks.
We're Rothschilds.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
They
we'll
knew
be
to live.
good.
They're like, we'll be reincarnated anyway. They'll just bring us back in AI or something.
I'm just gonna come back as Bill Gates in 100 years.
Oh, okay. So here, did I skip St. Yes, I skipped St. Louis. Sorry. Okay, so here's St. Louis in 1904.
Real quick, before you move on to St. Louis, you said that last picture of Buffalo was in what year?
1901.
I mean, they would have had electricity. I don't know if they would have had a grid like that though, like Joe said. But they had the capability of
Yeah, but how
Some
are they
lighting.
manufacturing that much electricity?
Yeah,
mean,
that I don't
that's
have an
a-
answer for.
A lot of
Well,
money.
and their excuse was that they were channeling the Niagara Falls to power this, which is quite a ways away from the actual fair.
Hydropower back then.
That's what the claim is. Yes, they
Huh.
used Niagara Falls to power this. I was like, okay, it's
And
likely
that
story.
I'm assuming that structure, whatever they use from Niagara Falls, has also disappeared.
If there was one, yeah, I would imagine, because the only thing that usually lasts from these fairs is the art building, because the only way that they could get it insured was it had to be a permanent structure. So their claim is that all the the buildings that housed all the expensive art were one of the only permanent structures on the site, and all the rest.
The whole story doesn't make any fucking sense that they would do this level of architecture and intricacy for a couple weeks or however long the fairs lasted, just to showcase their ability to do this and then to demolish it. Like, just that in itself is enough to question it, besides everything else involved.
The fairs aren't even mentioned though in the story. Like the Great Chicago Fire. I heard that story. I lived in Chicago for a couple years. They don't talk about the World's Fairs in that story at all. They focus on the cow. They focus on how many people died and how windy it was. Same with St. Louis, same with Buffalo, same with everywhere these fires were. It's a great, wherever the city is, fire is the name of the story, and they don't focus on any of the stuff you're talking about.
And that's another great point, Jen, because one of the things I'm starting to look into now, and something for other people to look into, look at the amount of massive fires in the 1800s that wiped out almost entire cities. I mean, you go and you start looking, and every year there's at least one, and it's just massive destruction. We're not talking like a building fire. We're talking a citywide fire, like you're saying with Chicago in 1871. Now that's another one that's worth looking into for people, because the 1871 fire in Chicago, there were 3 other fires around Lake Michigan that same day that caused like millions of acres of damage, and they're not tied together. Nothing, no event happened. They're just 4 random fires that just so happen to happen around Lake Michigan.
Sounds a
It's-
lot like the last couple years here in California.
Yeah, right.
They're just
and
destroying the mountains. Yeah.
that's what you start thinking is like, what was the purpose? Like we think in California they're doing it so they can set up their rail system, right? They're clearing land so they can buy it up and build whatever they want to do with it. I don't understand what they were trying to do here, other than show that, okay, this is what you had, and you're not going to have it again. We're going to take it away and destroy it.
That's what it seems like, especially with the earlier ones from the 1850s. Is it seems like that was already there. They made up a story about how it was built in 6 months or 9 months, and then they're like, and to erase any evidence, it's gonna catch fire somehow, even though it's
Yeah, and then they make up a story about a cow starting it, and everyone spreads that around like a rumor, word of mouth, and then it just happened that way. And
as we've seen in the last
it.
year, everyone believes stupid shit. They're like,
Yep,
yes,
yep.
this is how this happened.
There wasn't even, like social media or anything, obviously, back in the day. They're definitely going to take everything at face value, for sure. I'm sure there were some people who were questioning things.
Well,
They probably got suicided.
It's a lot easier to not.
Another interesting thing about this is one of the things that you're going to see if you try and read about the fair, the official narrative for most of the fairs comes from the same guy. He supposedly wrote like 60,000 pages worth of documents on World's Fairs, and also on how the West was settled and the history of the natives. And you start looking at it and you're like, oh, I see what you did. You have one or two guys that are writing the narrative. So in addition to actually doing the destruction, they're actually on the other side of it, rewriting the story. And there's a guy, if anyone wants to look into, H.H. Bancroft, and he's tied with the Chicago Fair, is one of the big ones he was tied to.
Just his name sounds a little shady.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about his name sounding shady is I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about the King James Bible. Well, the guy who actually wrote the King James Bible for King James was last name Bancroft. And I'm like, there's got to be okay, so one of them wrote the Bible and now the other one's rewriting history. Okay, I see where we're going here.
They might be on the same team.
I think they're probably the same person,
It
the
could
same
be.
entity. I wouldn't say person.
That, yes, and that's what I was thinking, Jen. It's just a name, right? It's just an entity that they create to say this is who wrote the narrative, and that's exactly it. And yeah, so we get into these things and you just start looking, and again, it's the same architecture in different places all over the United States. And like we keep saying, there was no open communication. So it's not like these cities were talking to each other saying, hey, look what I'm building over here. You want to build one over there? We'll send our guys to you next. No, these things were there already. Does
it say how long it took them to build this one?
St. Louis is another 2 years. Yep.
Oh, of course.
Oh, yeah, no big deal.
The picture for the audio listeners, the picture he just showed was St. Louis 1904, and it was an aerial view, but it wasn't a photo. It was a drawing or a painting. But how are they? I mean, maybe they're up on a mountain drawing what they see. That's possible, but they also had cameras then. So why are they not taking a picture from an aerial view? Would that prove their
maybe they were just being artistic.
airships?
Yeah.
And look at the landscape all around, Joe. The landscape's perfectly flat. There just so happens to be one hill that they could do this from.
Oh, I don't see any curvature of the earth from up there either.
Don't start that shit.
I always have to go there. It's interesting.
But so you look, this looks just like what I showed you for Buffalo. So anybody that's looking, it's like the Court of Honor in Chicago, where you have these beautiful white buildings and a river, a waterway in between all the buildings, and then there's this giant building at the end with a dome that kind of looks like the Capitol building, but it's amazing.
Yeah, it looks like a giant boob. I always
like every
why.
Capitol building ever in Washington D.C. and the National Monument. Like, it's weird.
I'm pretty sure the U.S. Capitol, not the White House, the Capitol, the giant boob. I'm pretty sure that was built sometime way before they told us it was, and they kind of repurposed it because there's pictures of them digging the mud out from that motherfucker too.
Yep, and there's a whole nother layer underneath.
That's where they hide the kids.
Yeah, it's a whole other layer underneath that matches everything that's above it. So nobody would have built that building for the underground part to match the top unless they built it never intending for that bottom half to get buried.
Yes,
Something
exactly.
happened.
And
What in the
maybe
world
it
happened?
wasn't, and it probably wasn't buried when they built it, right? Because it
No,
doesn't make
exactly.
much sense to build underground. They weren't building underground well, they were obviously because there's tunnels everywhere, but it doesn't make sense to build underground. So it's almost like it was there. A lot of land, mud came in and buried half of it,
Right.
and they dug it out. And that's what
Right.
one of the options here is maybe all this stuff was here, and it only took 2 years to dig it out.
Well, and it makes
that
you
makes a
wonder
lot more sense.
too, if there was that big of a mudslide, imagine how the Earth's continents may have looked long before that. Who knows if there were connections from what we now know as one country to another country that isn't there anymore because of this cataclysmic event.
Well, and there's many maps you'll see out there where California was an island. So I mean, that's a very, very distinct possibility that, like you're saying, there's rumors of Atlantis, right? Of Lemuria, these different land of Mu is another one that are supposedly either in the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean, and they sunk or were flooded, so
California kind of is an island to itself at this point.
No way. I'm so glad that we can drive over the border of this shitty state easily.
Yes.
As far as we know.
you got to have an easy way to get out.
Mhm.
Yeah, but when you come back into California, they'll ask you if you have any produce like they do, or they used to do at the border in Canada.
Yeah,
Y'all
right.
got lettuce?
Oh, yeah, they asked me that when I moved here. They were like, "Do you have
Yeah.
any plants?" And I thought they were talking about marijuana plants, and I was like, "No, definitely not." And I was super hostile about it. And she's like, "Okay, fine." Jesus
She's like, no,
Christ."
I mean, do you have broccoli? And you're like, no, why would I have broccoli?
They were checking for bugs.
I
It's
know.
Like, yeah, I did not know. I thought they were asking if I had marijuana plants.
You bringing
Okay,
meat
for anybody
plants in?
who's not, for
I was
anybody
coming
who's,
from the Midwest, and they're very anti-marijuana plants, which I did not have on me.
I'm pretty sure we're in a space of our own here in California. For anybody who's not in California, if you come over the border, they have specific stations to check and see if you have fresh produce on you because they're worried about bugs on that produce. And guess what? Just pro tip here. If you do have produce on you, you just tell them no and they let you through. It's that fucking easy.
Also, have you ever seen the bugs in California? They're fucking huge. So like they're doing
Yeah,
a terrible
I don't know
job.
what they're worried
Doesn't
about.
matter.
Anyway, sorry, sidetrack on
Sorry.
fucking shit.
We're doing legit batshit here.
Yeah.
So here's one that's interesting. This is San Francisco in 1915. Okay, now think about San Francisco. 1906 or 7, I believe, was the Great Fire, a great earthquake that basically flattened San Francisco. So in 8 years, we're back up to this.
Right.
It is like, and for those listening, I mean, we're looking at a building here that's probably 500 to 1,000 feet long, has a giant tower in the middle. It's an exquisite layout. And the other thing with San Francisco that's interesting, this tower here is a 435-foot tower called the Tower of Jewels, and it had actual jewels in it on the exterior that when they would shine light on it, it would shine off different colored lights and all sorts of cool things.
Dude, it takes them 8
generating
years to
energy.
build one building on one block.
Exactly. Yeah. And what you notice here, this is built right next to the residential area. So it's right along the sea, and you can see Alcatraz in the
I was
background.
just about to ask that. I was going to say, did they depict Alcatraz back there?
Yep, there's Alcatraz back here.
I hate to ask every time, but is that a photo too, or is that a rendering?
It is a photo. Yeah, there's a copyright down here.
Look at the buildings closest to you,
Wow.
Joe. They're a lot higher definition.
And well, here's the thing. That's one of the interesting things that I've seen is that there was Photoshop back then. So, the equivalent, they were able to layer pictures on. And that's one of the things I find sketchy about this, because if you look in the
absolutely.
foreground, it's very clear and distinct. Then you get to what the buildings for the fair, and they're kind of faint. And then you get to the background, which is the water and Alcatraz and the hill back here, and that's even fuzzier.
Right.
So it's almost like it's layered on there. And that's one of the deceptions that we've also fallen for, is that some of the pictures, old pictures, are actually layered photos and aren't real.
Well, in those old photos, they worked off of the light going through things and refracting back. At this distance, I don't even know that, not in the daytime or maybe in the, I don't know, that to me that just doesn't seem like an old camera back then would have been able to catch Alcatraz in those mountains.
Yeah, and you see some, like, if you look at the dome here, you'll see like a glare spot, which, you know, it's just random. And then you don't see any others, you know? And
Yeah.
it looks photoshopped, but it's a
almost
real
like
picture.
everything we're told is manipulated, even old pictures.
I think they looked at this picture and they were planning how they could show us the moon landing. They're like, ooh, all right, in about 50 years, we're going to do some crazy shit.
Like, if they
We can
believe
do
this, we can totally get away with the moon landing because
Right.
these fuckers are fucking idiots.
I don't know where you guys want to go. I can bring us into Chicago,
What's your
which
next
is
slide. Yeah, let's do it.
okay.
Dude, you're the one
so-
with the knowledge. I told you, we're just here to make dick jokes. Go ahead.
All right. so-
I will be having to cut out, but they can continue talking if I do.
Okay.
Of course.
right.
Well, goodbye
Sorry,
for now,
Ben.
Ben,
Bye.
if you go.
See you later.
Okay. Thanks.
So Chicago is an interesting one because this is kind of the crown jewel of our fairs, at least. It was in 1893, 690 acres they built out on swampland, mind you. Okay. And they built over 200 giant buildings
90?
in less than 2 years.
Of course.
And in addition to that, they built the world's largest Ferris wheel, which was 265 feet high. And they also had a 65-foot statue, Columbia, which many of you are familiar with. If you've seen the Court of Honor, the statue, it looks like the Statue of Liberty. And supposedly Columbia, this was supposed to be an homage to Columbus. The fair was supposed to take place in 1892, which would have been 400 years after the whole 1492 bullshit story. So this whole fair is dedicated to Columbus and the discovery of America. Well, Columbia is kind of interesting because if you think about Columbia, the District of Columbia comes to my mind. I feel like this fair was more of a, you know, passing the torch to DC than anything else. And as we go through it, we'll see some of that stuff. But they had supposedly 27.3 million people came to this. Now, mind you, the US population at the time was about 62 million. So either there were a lot of foreigners coming or people were repeat visitors. And then on one day, okay, every fair has this one day where they had this huge spike. Supposedly in one day, they had 750,000 people show up to the fair, which is just unbelievable.
They had nothing to do. They were shoveling horse shit back then.
Ooh, that's
you know?
tomorrow. That's 128 years later.
Ooh,
Yeah.
What a synchro.
To the day.
For the day.
So yeah, so here's all the things they would have had to build, you know, a transport system. They would have had to find a way to get mail and supplies in and out. Hospitals, where are all the hospitals? Where's all the, you know, the shelters for the workers, the food? How do they get that in and out? Where are these people going to the bathroom? You know, these
There's the
things.
beer truck.
Was this in
Yeah.
the 1800s? They don't give a shit. They
Shit,
just poop
yeah.
outside, right?
And-
Didn't they do that? Didn't they throw their shit out the window at this point?
Basically.
I think so.
But it's,
Yeah.
but it's the Great White City. And that's the other thing. They called it the Great White City, which was basically, you know,
Racist.
well, it was. It was to promote this European dominance of America, right? This whiteness of America, taking it away from the natives. So yeah, we're looking at these. There's little to no blueprints for any of the buildings. Okay. They didn't have any machines or trucks or electricity.
They just eyeballed it.
Yeah. They say that they used about 40,000 workers for Chicago, which, okay, I guess, but still, that's, again, who fed them? Where did they sleep?
You
There's-
can't even find 40,000 workers to work at McDonald's today. Are you serious?
Well, it was a different time though, because
Yeah.
times were tough. This was right after a couple like depression type things that they had. So let's get into it. So here's the three scenarios that Howdy lays out, right? That the construction really took 30 to 40 years. They just totally lie about the time frame. Number two would be it actually took 2 years to complete, but they had some advanced technology that we don't know about. that was able to allow them to build, maybe it was electricity. They had these tools. They had some form of transportation that we don't know about, something. Or the third is that the buildings were there for thousands of years. They weren't really built, but they were dug out and refurbished, painted to look new. One of the terms that you hear from the fair is whitewash, right? And that's an interesting one, because what is whitewash or whitewashing?
Erased.
Yes, right. So you, not only are you covering up, but you're erasing. So I feel like this fair was the Great Whitewash, right? It's not the Great White Fair, but the Great Whitewash. Another interesting thing, to take pictures at the fair. Okay. Now, mind you, it was about 25 cents to get in. They wanted you to pay $2, which for people back then was a lot of money to take pictures.
That'd be like $2,000 now, right?
Something like that. I think that's more of like the 10 would have been like $2,000. So you're probably looking at about $1,000, Actually, yeah, you're probably right. About 1,500 to take a picture. Okay. And interestingly enough, the camera was named the Columbus that Kodak put out at that time. Just a coincidence, I'm sure.
It always is.
So now if you wanted to do a tripod picture, like a nice formal picture, that was $10, which was the same cost as your fare, lodging, and meals for the whole trip. So they did not want pictures taken. And in all, they assigned the photographic rights to one gentleman named Charles Arnold Dudley, I believe or Charles Dudley Arnold, something like that is his name. So he was the official photographer. So if you're looking for pictures, he will be the only one that has the legitimate photos from the fair. So now let's look at the fair. Okay. Again, what you're looking at, if you're listening, is, a inlet with water all around and these intricate buildings placed everywhere. I mean, we're talking just everywhere. You're looking at, domes and, just large structures. Again, they did 690 acres of swampland in 2 years. And according to Howdy, he has a friend who's an architect, and the architect said that it would take 2 years just to plan it, 2 years to do the landscaping, and then about 10 to 15 years to do the construction with about 50,000 guys and unlimited budget with today's technology.
I wonder if it's just because back then government wasn't an absolute dumpster fire and they didn't have to go through as many regulations and they could actually find people that wanted to work. Playing the devil's advocate here, but I still don't think even with all of that, that could be done in 2 years. That's ridiculous.
That's the thing, is that that's not even one of the things that he mentioned was the idea of today's permitting process on all the red tape. That would just be to plan it and landscape it. And that's then, with 50,000 people.
And on top of it, think about the laborers you would have to have. You're just telling me that these unskilled laborers are just going to build this, right? There has to be no one with experience that has built anything like this, because this is sort of unique. So where are you getting these skilled laborers to do that? That's
if you look at the total population of America at this point.
Let's see. Well,
that might be something.
62 million. 60 in 1893, it was 62 million.
And they used how many laborers on this one?
About 40,000.
That's well, I don't know. That's still a pretty significant portion of the population if it's spread out across the U.S.
Big chunk. And they were coming in, and supposedly Disney's father was one of the guys who was a construction worker on this. Ironically, that they had to fit him into the story somewhere. And that's where Disney got the idea for his theme parks, was from this 1893 exposition. I mean, so to give you an understanding
of it, motherfucker by himself.
Oh yeah, to say the least. To give you an idea,
after hearing your fucking episode on him, I'm like, fuck that guy. But anyway, sorry for cutting.
And I went gentle on him. I could have gone a lot darker, but I wanted to keep it kind of in the middle because there's a lot of darker shit out there on him too.
You should have put 4 fingers up his ass, man. What are you doing holding back? You can take it.
So just to give you a perspective of this, right? It was built in a park called Jackson Park. So if we take the layout of Jackson Park, you can put all of Epcot and all of Magic Kingdom inside the fair grounds, and still not cover all of the land. So think about that, building out Epcot and building out Magic Kingdom and a little bit more in less than 2 years. It just doesn't make any sense.
It would make more sense if it was in the time, like in today's time, but in that time with what they were working with horse and carriage. I know I keep coming back to that, but you got to think about that. They traveled around by horse and carriage.
Yes. How did they get materials to and from the site? And who was producing these materials, right? How are we getting the massive amount of materials needed to do these jobs? I mean,
Mexicans.
They're saying it's wood. Where is all the timber coming from, right? I mean, we look at that the Crystal Palace from London alone, that supposedly took 660,000 timbers to build. Like, so think about what these buildings must have taken. I mean, what I'm showing here is a overview of the fairgrounds again, but you look at the buildings, they covered about 167 of the 690 acres. The manufacturer's building alone covered 30 acres of land. It was the biggest building in the world at the time. And I'll show you some pictures of it here in a sec. The machinery building, another 18 acres, transportation building, 16 acres, agricultural, 13. So we're talking about massive buildings. I mean, think about your house on a 1 acre lot, how small that is. And then just magnify that and you'll understand the scale of this. So we get into
and just for a temporary thing that none of it adds up. I'm sorry, like
just for 6 months, Joe.
crazy.
We just want it for the fair. So
they don't even do that now.
This is what you get for the best of construction photos. Okay, so this is I believe this is the it's either manufacturer's or agricultural building. I get them confused, but what you see in these pictures for the people listening is you'll see the building, and then what you'll see is scaffolding around the outside. And then in this picture, they actually do show us some lumber materials. Most pictures, you get nothing. And all that you see in the picture is one guy on a horse. There's nobody working. There's no workers on the building itself. It's empty. And it's the middle of the day because there's light out. It's not dark. So they should be working if they are doing construction. And you don't see any of it. So you go to the next one.
Like you were talking about earlier, the sky is whited out.
Sky is completely whited out. Yeah. And I've had some photography guys say, well, that was how the cameras worked back then. I don't.
Of course.
Okay. Sure. It's
more
convenient.
Whitewashing.
We believe you as much as anyone else.
Yeah. So this is the horticulture building, and here you see some construction. You actually see some steel going up. But again, if you look at this photo here on the right, you see an already built building, you see some scaffolding, and then you see just 3 guys standing there like they're posing for a picture. You don't see any actual construction. There's no materials, I mean, you look at this is the horticulture building. You see the frame here, right? You'll see the building, the lower half of the building is complete. The upper half is an addition that they're working on. It's a work in progress. But again, look down on the ground. There's no materials here. You'll see a couple scattered pieces of lumber, but there's no steel or anything that they're building with that would match this.
And actually, I would say that looks more like a drawing. I mean, it kind of looks like a photo, but it also it's so sparse, I guess.
Yeah,
that it looks like
I'm with you. And again, they just put a couple people in here just to give you some semblance of this being real. But, I don't know what to think. These
very strange.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in the same token, you also don't see any machinery or anything like that.
Nothing to lift up the materials, right, Ben? No scaffolding,
right? No cranes. The first thought is, I'm like, that actually supports that they didn't have advanced technology back then. But then I'm like, I don't see it happening any other way.
Yeah,
but yet none of it's in the photo.
And look at the skies, completely white, not a cloud in the sky.
Well, and what are those antenna things on the lower right picture?
Down here.
No, to the right of that. Are those antennas sticking up in the back? Yeah, those things.
Right here. That looks like part of the structure. Yeah, I can't really make it out as to what it is. In the picture next to it, though, you'll see right here.
Yeah.
This is an actual utility pole.
Yeah.
No wires, but it's a utility pole.
No,
Huh.
none of it makes sense.
It's so bizarre. And
This
now,
reminds me of the pictures from that crazy documentary we talk about all the time, about the pictures from some of these old cities where the whole city is there, but there's zero people. It's like a ghost town. But
yes,
I mean, I know you know what I'm talking about. For the anybody who hasn't seen it, we're gonna add the documentary into the show notes again because you got to watch it. Like, just look at it. It's very strange. It's actual photos of all these huge cities with zero people in them. Like, try going to New York City right now and taking a picture with zero people. It doesn't happen.
and
There's people.
San Francisco's the big one for that. A lot of the early pictures from San Francisco, you see all the architecture, not a person on the street.
Well, and the documentary did it with Denmark, Moscow. There was several cities that they had, pieced together panoramic, but were clearly all taken by the same camera, just at different times, but they all lined up perfectly, and not a person in sight. And my first thing was that I was like, I don't care if they put out a citywide mandate that said you had to stay inside, we're taking pictures of the city. Even if everybody heard it and listened, one guy would be like, yeah, sorry, I got shit to do. But
Yep.
no, not a person in sight.
Nope, not one. Not a person. So back to Chicago, what's even crazier, right? Okay, so they're building out the fair. Oh, in addition to building out the fair, they're building these buildings as well. The university, John Rockefeller financed the University of Chicago, which just so happened to be right next to the exposition that they were building out. And he had it got a lot of it got destroyed in a fire in 1886. So between 1890 and 1893, right around the time when they're doing the construction for the fair, he decides that they're going to rebuild the Chicago University. And they build, for those listening, this massive building with enormous towers. I mean, this tower has to be a couple 100 feet high. The building is all stone. It's a beautiful building. And they're building, where are they getting, again, where's all the manpower coming from? They built the Coliseum in Chicago at this time, which is another monster of a building that looks straight out of an Old English or Roman, architecture. It's all brick and stone. It has the copper tin roof. It's just beautiful. And then you look at the Chicago City Hall, which looks like your standard city hall, for the time. But again, it's a massive complex. And if you look at the city hall, one of the things you'll notice is half windows, which is very interesting.
Well, and also of that like Roman-esque type of thing with the columns and all of that stuff. It's all out of the same era.
Yeah, and the intricate molding around the top,
right,
and all the windows. Yeah, it's just so in addition to building the fair, they had time to do all this too. And this one too, this is another one. This is the Chicago Cultural Center, which had a 38-foot Tiffany glass dome, which had 30,000 panes of glass in it, cost about $2 million to build. And the inside of this building is all white Carrara marble.
Is that expensive?
Yeah, it might be. Try get a quote for your kitchen. See how that goes.
Yeah.
So okay, so now we'll get to the actual fair. All right, so this is the Statue of the Republic, the Golden Lady, or Statue of Columbia, which again, when you think Columbia, I'm thinking District of Columbia, not Christopher Columbus.
Dude, that's a whole other rabbit hole, the Columbia thing. I had no idea about that, but the goddess of Columbia, and there's Columbia Pictures, District of Columbia. There's a lot of people that say Statue of Liberty looks like Columbia with the torch. Like, that's a different podcast, but yeah.
Were you aware that the Statue of Liberty is in like, I don't know, probably like 50 to 70 countries in the world?
No, I was not.
I didn't know that until a couple days ago. Yeah, you look up just Google replica Statue of Liberties in all the countries that have their version of the Statue of Liberty in it. It's mind blowing. It's like, what? How did I not know about this? Oh, so ours isn't even unique. They're everywhere in the world.
Of course not. France is a hack. They just stole shit from everybody, and they're like, "Here you go, here you go, U.S. Here is your present." That was French
Matt,
accent.
I gotta head out. I got work early in the morning. Thank you for coming on. I will see all of you people later.
Man.
Bye to those
Ben.
in the chat. I'll
Pleasure,
Bye-bye.
Ben.
see you guys next time.
He has a real job, so
Yeah, sucker like the rest of us.
I know it sucks. I'm trying to get out of that right now. Actually, also a different show, but
Good for you.
continue with your Columbia stuff.
So we look at that, but that gets me into, if there's Statue of Liberties all over the world, maybe there's some more significance to the statue. Like that could be their thing to usher in this new era. And this one, so not only is she 65 feet tall, but she's standing on top of a 30-foot pavilion. So this thing was enormous. And supposedly it was covered in all gold. Some say there's rumors it was made of gold, and some say it was just coated in gold. The one on the right here is a replica that's in Chicago today of it, because obviously this main one burnt down. A statue that burnt, that makes sense. Okay. But in her right hand, she has an orb and an eagle with its wings spread. Okay, which is supposedly the representation of Horus. That's a whole nother rabbit hole. But then in the left hand, she has a staff with a winding serpent.
Where have we seen that?
Yeah, another rabbit hole. So that's one. So let's go. What do we got here? Here we go. This is the Court of Honor, and this is what I've been referencing over and over again. You look at this, guys, this looks like Rome, ancient Rome. This does not look like downtown Chicago or Chicago on the lake here. You have all of these beautiful white buildings in a court, around this body of water with these statues and fountains and just beautiful architecture that is gone. None of it's around anymore.
You know what's there now in that spot?
I don't know what's in Jackson Park these days. Honestly, that's a good question. I got to look into that.
Where is it? Jackson Park where? I'm sorry.
Chicago.
Oh, okay.
This is a video. I won't play it, but this goes into the Court of Honor here and how, all the intricate stuff in there. This is, again, this is the peristyle. So behind the statue is this giant 600-foot long, 60, again, now let's look at this. It's 600 feet long, 60 feet wide, 60 feet high. The old 666 just so happens to rear her ugly head again.
And it looks very Roman again.
Oh, it's totally Roman. Now, actually, it looks like the Vatican. Now, I'll show you right here on this next slide as we go. Maybe not. So here we go. So if you look at this picture here, it looks like the center of the Vatican, where they have they have the obelisk in the middle. This doesn't have the obelisk, but that's where the statue comes into play. But they have this giant, which looks like the Arch de Triomphe in France, as the middle of it. And then going out are these columns with a platform, and they have statues on each column. The tip of each column is a statue. And it's just, it's mind-blowing. It doesn't fit in Chicago back then at all.
No, have you seen Chicago lately?
Yeah, seriously. I wouldn't go there. You couldn't pay me to go there.
There are parts of Chicago that are beautiful and very clean.
Oh, no, we went there. Yeah, it was
the
great.
west side of Chicago, not so much. No offense.
Yeah, stay away from
Maybe this is the west side of Chicago. We don't know. They just demolished it, and they're like, this is where all the gun crime is now.
Yeah.
There are parts of Chicago that are absolutely gorgeous, though, and super clean. That's neither here nor there. I'm just saying.
Sorry to break up your train of thought, Matt.
Oh, no. And again, these are more pictures of the Court of Honor just from a different angle. And you look, and I mean, it's just, and this one gets everyone, because you look at this, and in the foreground, you have some fountains with the statue of Columbus. You can see their strategically placed obelisk in the background. We have to have an obelisk. That's part of their symbolism. And then you look at
the dicks.
Oh, gotta have it. And more the merrier.
Oh, I'm going to take that sound drop. I'm sorry.
And yeah, I mean, I could just go on for days with these pictures of the courtyard because it's such a beautiful, beautiful layout. And again, here it is lit up. Okay. They had more lights in this exposition than they did in all of New York City at the time to light this thing up. And it's just, yeah. So we have, let's see, it says 93,000 incandescent lights and 5,000 arc lights to do it. And it cost about $1 million to run the electrical plant.
And $1 million back then was
Like
how
a
much
bajillion
now?
dollars now.
That's, yeah.
I think it was
we're
a
talking-
bazillion.
At least a
actually, I'm sorry.
gazillion. Yeah.
We're talking, yeah, somewhere in the ballpark, gazillion, trizillion, somewhere in there, you know?
A Google.
Yeah, so this is just, again, the layout, a map of the buildings. I want to get to some building. Okay, so here we go. This is the Manufacturers and Liberal Arts building. This is the building I was talking about before. This was kind of the centerpiece of it. It was the biggest building. It itself covered about 30 acres. Again, on the outside, you have these beautiful arches. You have cornered columns with spires coming off them. I wonder if they were trying to bring in electricity. The roof is a beautiful copper roof up here. And it's just, it's a building that could hold up to 300,000 people.
Jesus. And this is a photo too, right? I can kind of tell
Yes.
by the clarity.
Yeah.
That's an actual photo.
No one
Yeah,
would ever
that-
have a copper roof unless they wanted to attract electricity, though. Copper is a huge inductor of electricity. Why would you ever? I don't know. If our house had a copper roof, I'd be like, fuck that. No way.
Like free energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
especially out there, you guys would melt. That thing would probably burn right
Yeah.
through.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
Now it's not a smart choice for a house.
No. So
or any building, unless you're trying to attract electricity.
yeah. And yeah, I mean, you just look at this and it's just, this seems more like a painting because you actually get the sky and it's kind of altered. I don't know. But again, just looking at this building, it's so enormous. And just to understand the scale of it is mind blowing. And mind you, not only did they build this, they built 200 other buildings too. In, you know, I mean, you just
In 2 years,
at,
probably.
yeah, less than 2 years. They started construction
Right.
in 1891. They were done in 1893. Now, mind you, all the buildings weren't complete when they opened, like complete. They were doing touch-ups and stuff and doing the whitewashing of some of the building outside of the buildings at the time. But for the most part, they completed everything in 2 years. Now, this is the crowd for the opening ceremonies. They had 100,000 people in the building. And I mean,
Jesus.
it's just, you look at this and they're shoulder to shoulder in there, and they could, this is just a kind of a zoomed in view. If you came back, you know, they're only in about a half of this building right here. So
Wow. Can you imagine the gas back then? Like people were farting up a storm, and
and there
they're
couldn't
literally
have been
neck
good
to neck.
ventilation in there, man. Not at all.
There's a high ceiling, so that's a good sign. But
I don't think
Yes.
hygiene was on anyone's priority list, so they were probably used to bad smells.
oh no, hygiene was not on their list. Look at the
No.
structures they're making.
I just don't think, you know how when someone has really bad BO or bad breath, they don't smell it on themselves? I bet these people didn't even notice.
like me. Are you talking about?
No.
So
I
yeah,
think you
here's
smelled it.
another one. This is the agricultural hall. You know, it's a 500 by 850 foot building. I mean, it's just a monster. Again, you have a beautiful dome roof to it with a, you know, a conductor on top or a receptor on top of some sorts. And the building itself is just massive with big windows. You see, you know, the columns and the different forms of architecture in it. It's just, it's mind blowing. It just doesn't really make any sense how
None
they
of
could
these
get
buildings exist today. Am I right?
correct. The only one, and I'll get to it right here. Where's the only one? Not even this one. This is the machinery hall. Okay, this is where they kept all the machines. But just, I
Good
mean,
name.
you look at it and look at these towers. I mean, they have these towers up here that are just, I mean, it's a 3-level tower on top of the building with intricate design. I mean, And the funny thing about this building is they ran machinery in here, and this is where they would sample machinery too, right? The machinery of the times. The building was so loud, people couldn't spend more than a minute in there. Otherwise, they would start getting headaches and nauseous from all the fumes and everything. So, and the noise. This building, you know, part of the lack of preparation was this building because it just didn't work out well. But look at it. I mean, you look at the design of it, it's just doesn't make sense. So
It doesn't make sense that none of these exist today, but we have, you know, however many thousands of years old buildings from Rome and Italy that are still standing, like the Colosseum, that's still standing, but nothing of this sort in America is still standing.
Like we couldn't find a use for this. There was no, we couldn't use this at any point in time. We're just going to destroy
Or even
it.
as a museum or a tourist attraction like Americans like to do.
They were probably afraid people would harness its power and use it for what it was actually designed for.
They probably would walk in and immediately be enlightened from all the EMF waves.
Well, no, it's missing something in the top. It's missing something.
The
The energy source, something. Yeah.
something.
Yeah, exactly. And so you'll look here. This is the horticulture building, which is a couple football fields long. Again, has a giant dome in the middle. What was this dome? This dome was 187 feet, crystal dome on top, and then two smaller crystal domes in front of it at the entrance with a giant arch to get you into the building. And I mean, it's just the scale is unbelievable. Let me show you. The only building that survived is not the fish, not the government,
No.
not the transportation. I mean,
Whoa.
yeah. Look at the entrance.
Seriously, if you're listening on audio, you got to check this video out. The pictures are fucking amazing.
Yeah, the audio does it no justice whatsoever. You have to see these pictures. So look at this entrance. This is just an entrance to the transportation building. I mean, that's Chicago of 1893. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like a portal.
And that's an
They're like,
actual
here's transportation in this time.
actual
We're just gonna walk
picture.
through.
You can
walk
tell.
through
Look at
Stargate.
it. Like, what the? Why is that
It's
not still
amazing,
there?
though.
Why is that not there still? What
Yeah,
the fuck happened?
Why would you tear that down? Like this, it just doesn't make any sense. And the women's building is another massive building. I mean, it was.
Well,
like
you know why they
400
tore that down.
Yeah. Yeah, we know. And then, okay, so this is the admin, and that's not it. But look at lit up. Just, I mean, okay, where is it? That's the.
Are you trying to find the one that actually still stands? It's going to be a fucking brick
Here it is.
building.
Here we go. The Palace of Fine Arts. This is supposedly the only permanent structure that they built. Okay. And this is Palace of Fine Arts. It's what's it cover? Like 5 acres, something like that. It's a massive building. Again, you have the columns to enter it. You have a statue out front, columns lining the front of the building. You have your giant dome on top. And then it's just, and what this had all of the artwork from around the world. So, I mean, you can just think of the value of the stuff that was in here at the time. I mean, France had their own section of this building for all their art and everything like that. But that's what every nation that was participating, all the different states, they would bring all their art, and this is what that building would store. This is a little video on it, but yeah, this is the only one that survived. And again, look at the detail here. So you'll see these columns, and an interesting thing, notice the top of the column. See how the ends are rounded there? I know this has a name, and I should have remembered it.
Is it Corinthian?
So either Corinthian, iambic, something like that.
There's like 4 or 5 of them. Something.
One of the interesting things on that is I saw Michelle Gibson, who's great at this research. She was talking about the other day that looks like the top of like a guitar or like a bass, like an instrument. Mm-hmm. So, you know, these things, they're not just for decoration. There's definitely more to it. Like you look at the ornamentation up here with all these circles that are cut in and statues. Everything's perfect. There's nothing off, and everything is symmetrical too. It's so it just mirrors the perfection all along the way. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's for harnessing or generating a frequency for sure.
Has to be. You're
Whether it's
absolutely right.
electricity or otherwise. Yeah.
Yep. So then, so here, this is a map just to give you a perspective of some of the state buildings and everything like that. I'll show you some of these because these are mind blowing too. So every state had a building for the most part. And I believe for this one, about 45 to 50 nations had a building, had their own building. So on top of all the other buildings, these were built too by hand. So we'll look at some of these. Look at this Brazil building. I mean, it looks like something out of like a Disney movie. You know, it's this elaborate castle-like building with these domed towers and a giant dome in the top, and it's sitting on a lagoon with these beautiful stairs to enter it. I mean, I don't know. And we'll go to the France building, which looks like a giant arch de triumph, basically. And they called this the government building. I mean, this is probably a 75-foot high, building, solid. It's definitely not made out of plaster like they said it was. There's no way. This is
and that doesn't stand to this day either, right?
Nope, none of these do. This Victoria house, this was basically England's house. It looks like an English mansion back in the day, basically. This was built with wood and staff. You can tell from the picture that it's not brick. But then you get into something like the Guatemala building. I mean, look at this. This is just, it's got these fancy ornate tops to every corner of the building. And like, why does Guatemala need a building this nice? Like, okay. Germany looks like something you'd find in Bavaria. It's got a big old mansion type house, stone on the bottom half, like you would see there. And then it had either a copper or a wood roof, giant tower with a spire on top.
The weirdest thing is that all these buildings, like whether they're mansions or the government building, they all have these towers on the top.
Yes.
And that was basically a cathedral thing. And I mean, that's a different show too, getting into the cathodes and cathedrals, but it's very strange that these, supposedly normal buildings that just happen to be everywhere all had these towers and all had the same design to it with these arches and whatever the fuck else is on there.
There was clearly a technology happening before our time that
yes,
this was used for something for sure.
It was not decoration.
Generate or harness energy or frequencies. Like I was saying, there was something going on, and whatever the narrative is now wants us to think they were just destroyed in a fire, or that we built them in 2 years, or whatever. They
were just for a World's Fair.
Yeah, we built them for 6 months. They
were just for the rich people.
Yeah. And you just, I could scroll through all these, but these are just some of the different buildings from each state, and they kind of represent. You look at this one is at Rhode Island, it kind of looks like a White House almost. It's got this lots of columns with the rounded front. The one I wanted to show you was this one. Look at the Illinois State Building.
That looks like the Capitol.
Exactly. Yeah, it looks like the Capitol to a T with a little addition on the front. But yeah, it's the Capitol building basically. And again, this was built just for the fair and then destroyed afterwards. Like that.
Well, I always thought how weird it is that the White House does look very Roman. And as like a kid, where I looked at that building, I'm like, why is that the capital of our country? That looks like something out of Rome. Like, what's
a lot of the buildings down there, right? You look at Lincoln Memorial, it's got the Greek columns, Roman columns. You look at the White House, the Capitol.
Every state has a Capitol building that looks just like that, though.
Sacramento.
That is still standing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what you're starting to find is that people are starting to go out and look at their local, whether it's a town hall, whether it's a university or city hall. They all look the same. And one of the things they've done is hide these buildings, these old buildings, by giving them to universities or mental asylums or places like that. And then, so the public doesn't have access to them. And which is another good way to hide them. So, it's just, you know, you look at the Indiana State Building, it looks like Cinderella's castle from Disneyland. You know, it's got these two giant towers with flags on top and spires everywhere. And again, like Jen said, we got towers, we got rods on top. You know, it's never ending. Missouri, again, looks like the Capitol. They all have domes, all have all these, you know, New York
And it's
State.
strange that nothing is built like that today. Do you see what we've built
Nope.
today? It's all cube-like, and not to go super crazy into the Saturn cube stuff, but everything is super cube-like. There's no rounded or, you know, pointy or beautiful things. It's all structured cube fucking
It's
prison.
like a different thing took over after all of these domes.
That's
were
why I think
used
we're in
up
the
and-
beast system,
yeah.
and we have been.
Do you know what that type of construction's called or architecture's called? It's called brutal architecture.
Ooh.
That's what they call it. Brutal. You know, the new style of architecture is called brutal architecture. So they don't even try and
Huh.
hide it from you. That, hey, we just don't care.
They're like, we're living in brutal times.
No, they're like,
Brutal
it looks like a
architecture.
prison. Just fucking deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, suck it up. But yeah, there's plenty of these different buildings. We could go on and on, but the gist of it is, okay, here's an interesting one. They had a snow and ice railway, which was basically like a luge that you could go into and sit in, and it was about 400 feet, and it would take you around in a loop. And they had ice that was manufactured on site, and there were two trains that would just bring you around connected to bobsleds, and you could ride on this amazing loop. It looks like a bobsled track for those who are listening, but yeah, they just built that. Sure, why not? We had a people mover, a moving sidewalk here where you could just sit down and it would move you around the pier.
Like at the airport.
Exactly. Yeah. And this was the first time they ever used the people mover. I believe Paris had one too. This was the first time they used it in the States. And then the coup de grace is the human zoos that they had. Most of these fairs had human zoos, and that's what they called them, where they would showcase traditional lifestyles, you know, whether it was Indians or Arabs or you know, Slavs, whatever, and they would have them enact what their lifestyle would be like. I mean, the ultimate racist shit.
Were they in
say,
wait, were they in cages?
No.
Okay.
They weren't in cages. They had like their own area, you know, like an exhibit type station that they would go.
No, it was just cultural appropriation.
It sounds like an invisible cage. Were they there of their own free will? Do you know that?
That is up for debate. Because some say that some of these people, like, I mean, you look at most of the fairs had some sort of white versus native battles going on. They would reenact battles, and you know, so that's a big one. And even here they did it too. Did I get a picture of it? No, but you'll see. I mean, they dress them up just like how they would be dressed in their time, you know, their place.
Oh my god, it's so racist.
Fucking disgusting, though. Can you imagine those people? They definitely weren't getting paid. They weren't being compensated. They're like, you're going to be here or you'll pay with your life.
Yeah,
you know?
basically. And even like, oh, what's his name? Oh, the famous Native American Indian. They paraded him around at these things.
Chief Joseph? Crazy Horse? No, he died.
Man,
What's the one?
this is killing me now.
I wish we did research.
Yeah, I wish I had his name offhand. Damn it, I can't remember offhand. But one of the famous, you would know his name if I could remember it. But they would have these battles where they would reenact, you know, the bat, and obviously the Indians would always lose. And this guy had to come. He had to come and sign autographs and everything like that while he was a prisoner in American prison. They let him out on release to go to the fairs and, you know, serve as a puppet.
Upstate Nico in the chat says Geronimo.
Ooh, it could be that could be it. Yes, I believe that is it. So yeah, and then on top of it, they throw in this giant Ferris wheel that Mr. Ferris decided to build, which each car could hold about 60 people. So, and there were 36 cars. So you could hold about 2,100 people per ride. To give you an idea, it took about 10 minutes to go all the way around and make a full revolution.
Wow.
And most people stayed on for 2 rides or 2 revolutions. So it was like a 20-minute ride. You paid 50 cents. And they
Each
got a
car
million.
able to accommodate 60 people. That's
Yep.
that's insanely huge.
There were people that got married on these things. You know, and so people would find out that one person got married on it, so they had to one up them. One couple got married on top of one of those cars. So not just in the car, they wanted to do it on top of the car to one up everyone else.
And at the bottom there, it was reused in 1904 St. Louis Fair, blown up in 1906 with dynamite. Because,
Yep.
you know, that's what you do with a work of
Oh my
art
God.
is you just blow that fucker
Hey, well,
up.
they remade it in Las Vegas. We went on the high roller, and that's like the largest observation wheel. It's 550 feet tall,
It was probably way scarier than
and
this
they
one.
hold 40 to 60 people. It's something like that. I think maybe he holds 40 or 50 people, but it was very similar. Maybe it was probably not as scary as that shit that you're showing us.
Imagine being the first person on this one. Like,
No, I could never. I would walk away. I'd be like, nope, 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 nope.
Yeah, no, but yeah, again, yeah, they brought it to St. Louis and then reused it in that fair, and then much with the rest of St. Louis, they brought in this company from Chicago to blow it all up.
Wow.
So the last part I wanted to get to was, well, this is a whole different. There's this guy H.H. Holmes, who was one of the most prolific serial killers in America, that just so happened to stalk the Chicago Fair. Yeah, he was a doctor who ran a hotel. He ran the World's Fair Hotel, and he
And just
killed
off people.
Yeah, he killed between 27 and 200 people, somewhere in between. Because what he would do is he had this elaborate setup. And what he would do was, after he would kill people, he would either burn them in a furnace that he had in his place, or he would skin them and sell their skeletons to medical colleges.
I mean, he's resourceful. It's gross, but I mean, he knew what he was doing, I guess.
He mastered it, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
So we get, and here's the mayor got murdered on the third to last day of the fair. He was shot and killed by Patrick Pendergrass, which is another thing. You see the mayor get murdered here. You saw the president get murdered in 1891 or 1901 in Buffalo. There's, it seems almost like it was ceremonial,
A lot of this does.
Yeah, and
Hey,
then
you
we
think
get
that HH guy was like the HH Bancroft guy? That's kind of a weird...
This guy's name was like it wasn't even H. Yeah, his name was Herman.
Yeah, Herman Webster Mudgett.
And he changed.
So why'd he go by HH? That's
Henry Howard Holmes. He changed his name.
Oh,
but that's weird considering the guy that wrote
the Bible
and history. He's like, I'm gonna change my name to this. It's not really a great name. Why would you change your name to that? Herman Webster Mudgett sounds fine, I guess. I don't know.
I think there's some connotation with the name Mudgett. I have to dig into it a little bit, but yeah, there was something to do with his family history or something like that he tried to hide. And
it sounds weird to me. Mudgett's not normal.
Yeah, and he was a scam artist anyway. I mean, he was scamming people from the time he was a teenager on. So
he wasn't even that old when he died. He was 35.
35. They executed
him.
Yeah, they killed him.
I would hope so. He sounds like a bastard.
Well deserved.
Oh yeah, well deserved. And then we get into the fires, which in itself are interesting because you take a look at some of these photos, and there were 4 fires at the Chicago Expo. One took place during the fair. There was a chimney fire, and it actually, when the firefighters were trying to put it out, 12 of them passed away because of either smoke inhalation or the tower collapsed
because of fire. Yeah.
So then we get into, here's the 4 fire. That was the cold storage building one during the fair. Then January 8th, the year after the fair, 1894, the Court of Honor And we all remember how big and how beautiful the Court of Honor was, and it didn't really look like it was made of wood. So when we get there, you'll see what I'm hinting at. July 5th, 1894, the 7 great buildings are burnt down, which is the manufacturers building, the big ones that I showed you, the agricultural, horticultural. And then the coup de grace, 1896, the statue is intentionally burned down. So we get to the first fire that burned, these buildings. And then look at the aftermath here. I didn't even get to it. It's the next one. Okay. So this is the second fire that took out the major buildings. Okay. Which is the manufacturers, the mining, the electricity, transportation, agricultural, and machinery. The building they happened to save was the government building. Shocker.
Ooh, that's symbolic, right?
So now look at this destruction, though. Does that look like a fire or some sort of energy weapon that wiped everything out? Because
your bomb went off.
Yeah, it's like carpet bombing, right? This looks like a scene out of World War II for those that are listening. You can see this is concrete here that is scattered in the foreground. Okay. And then you'll see the twisted metal here from some of the buildings, and you'll even still see the statue in the background because we have to keep showing her. But yeah, and then the statue herself, they say, okay, just as the sun lifted its fiery head above Lake Michigan yesterday morning, mechanical engineer Wilder of the South Park system applied a match to the kerosene-soaked fuses leading to the base of the Statue of the Republic in Jackson Park. Within 5 minutes, the interior of the pile, standing 100 feet above the water in the lagoon, was a mass of flames. And 25 minutes later, it was charred and blackened skeleton of a once beautiful figure toppled and fell in the water. So supposedly they just set her on fire and let her go. And that was the end of the fair,
You can set gold on fire super easy.
Yeah. And and it was sitting on a concrete base, right? So that wasn't flammable. So how do you set this thing on fire with kerosene?
Was this in the news? Was this a newspaper article or something?
Let's see. Did we have one? This is it. This is the newspaper clipping right here that says fire quickly destroys it. 36 minutes she was burnt.
It's very specific.
Yeah, torch is applied, ordered by the Board of Park Commissioners.
Oh, weird.
Oh,
Yeah, its great beauty could no longer be preserved to the public. Now that was what I found interesting. That's like the sum of all these fairs in a nutshell. The beauty could not be preserved for the public anymore. They couldn't see it. It wasn't for them anymore. It's our time to show what we know now.
Jesus Christ.
Just, it's just amazing. You get into this and
Dude,
and we didn't even
have you back soon to do the World's Fairs are enough in itself, but if you have anything on more weird shit too,
you mean like
prehistory stuff?
Like star forts?
Yeah, like that. See, that's a whole different episode, but it ties into all this shit.
Where is it? Let me just
Find it.
I'll just show you. This is what we're talking about for anybody that doesn't know what star forts are. And just to show you a list, a map, there's a map of all the star forts in the world. And it's just a massive, there's anywhere from about 1,500 of them to 6,000. They're still finding them every day. And the interesting thing is, what you don't see here is, look up in Russia. You don't see any star forts. Yet they are known to have star forts all over Russia. Especially, there were supposedly 10 of them that lined the eastern side of Russia to block from something coming into Russia. Which, if you're into the whole Tartaria, that's the land of Tartaria, basically, that has nothing. You look, this is almost an exact map of Tartaria right here, where they don't have a single star fort.
And it's mostly ice and snow now.
Yeah, that's what they tell us. I've never been there.
Yeah, exactly. Me either.
Yeah,
I can't say that from my own eyes, but what they tell us is it's mostly snow and very cold.
And then here's the kicker. Over 91 star forts in the USA were built in the 1850s alone. So the story goes.
Right.
You know, so like this is how they all tie in, right? And this is why I keep bouncing from different hole, because one hole takes you to the another, and they all loosely tie in. And now anyone that's wondering about the star forts, and we can do a whole thing on them later, they're basically they're geoengineering, right? They just use the land to build a structure or build a pattern, and then they put structures within it. And what it is, it's all sacred geometry. It's all geometric patterns. And let me show you a good one here. This one blows my mind.
Oh, sorry. They could have been built in the 1850s, just not by people, you know?
Oh, there's that too.
True. Yeah. I mean, and you look at some of these, Jen, I mean, they're not small. Like
Huge. I've seen these, but I believe that they were built by other beings, not us. We were just there.
Like, I mean, you look at some of these pictures, it's just mind blowing. Like, how did they do that? Like Ben said before, without any aerial view of this, how do they line that
it
up?
looks like a crop circle. It looks like some other technology came in and did this.
I'm not saying really good at math.
I'm not saying they came from other planets. I have absolutely no idea, but it was something else that we
like
didn't
a crop
have.
circle. You mean like this?
Right.
Like, you know, like
very similar. Yes.
Yeah. And it's wild. So, and the story with them, these things have been everywhere you go and you read about these. The only reason these were built were for cannon defense. Seems legit.
Okay.
Okay. I mean,
yeah, you would build
as legit as the bat.
So yeah, that's a whole nother one. And then there's cathedrals, which I haven't gotten into yet, which I plan on it, because that's a whole nother energetic system that we haven't really looked into a whole lot. And that in that video they go deep into it. So yeah,
we'll definitely have to have you back for the star forts and the cathedrals and whatever the fuck else you got, dude, because this is insane stuff. I love this. Is my new favorite like subject. Fuck the government and Joe Biden. I want to learn about this stuff.
I know. What's at the center of these things? Do you know?
Now that's interesting. What's usually in the middle is that like this, you look at, it's almost like a harnessing area, right? There's usually either a fountain in the middle or some sort of like structure, something that could, you know, you look, that's not a good one. Let me see if I can find a good one where they can harness the energy, right? And that's why you see the water too around. There's always water around these things, except.
Do you think the water is an insulator or more of a conductor?
No, it's a conductor.
Conductor.
It's a conductor of electricity for sure.
Because there's like creeks or like canals that run out from it like a wire.
Water just is a conductor of electricity, though.
Yeah, exactly. That's it, Jen. These are giant conductors, and that's what it is. Because you look at this, you're not living there. People weren't living in these things, right? They weren't. There was basically what I've got out of it is a couple purposes. One was, energetic, right, to create energy. Two was frequency. What it would do was whatever shape the star fort was in would give that frequency to the water. So that would, and water has the ability to change its shape. So if you're closer to 432 hertz or a sacred geometric, it'll help everything around it grow. So that's one of the things they were looking at. And the other thing they say this may have been like a map on the ground for airships. Like, if you're traveling from country to country, when you get to another country, that's a landmark that you can know that can guide you to a certain point. Because all these things line up on ley lines and things like that too, which is a whole nother rabbit hole.
Isn't it so weird that you've never heard about these things in school ever? Like in the last, I don't know, month, I've learned about star forts and I'm like, why have we not seen this shit in school? Nobody's ever showed me this stuff.
Because that's
Why?
unimportant. You have to learn about Columbus coming over and peacefully taking over America.
Taking a dump on the Indians.
Or you got to
Yeah.
learn calculus because you're going to use that your whole life, right? I mean,
Totally.
come on.
Yeah, I use that all the time.
It just gets so ridiculous. And that's why, like you were saying, we never learned about any of this between the cathedrals, the World's Fair. They don't teach you any of that. These things, I hadn't heard of these until a couple of years ago. And I had actually been to one and didn't even realize I had been to one.
When?
Fort Ticonderoga up in New York.
Okay.
Yeah. I went up there when I was a kid. I remember going up there and yeah. And
That's crazy. I've been there too. Wait, where do you live?
I'm in Mass now. Western
Where?
Mass. Right near Amherst.
Oh, okay. I'm from Chelmsford, so
Okay.
Massachusetts. So the library there, you should look up the library in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. It's a dome. It has a green, like, copper dome on top. It's actually one of the writers for The Simpsons way back in the day used to live in Chelmsford and model. It's very, very a very small part in the beginning of The Simpsons, or at least it was. I haven't watched it in years, but the Chelmsford Library appears in the beginning of The Simpsons briefly.
Oh, that's cool.
In the beginning, but it's a crazy brick building with columns out front and a green dome on the top. And that was my library growing up. I lived there for 15, 20 years. So it's a pretty cool place.
And you don't
Really
even know the
interesting.
significance of it at the time.
Oh, no, of course not. I mean, I was born in 1980, so I didn't know the significance of anything until very recently.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, Justin in the chat says some people think they're Mandela effects. That's actually pretty
Ooh,
valid because
yeah.
nobody's ever talked about these things before. I think Nico or somebody earlier in the chat said till the last year or so. These are things that are kind of unraveling. Like, Matt, when was the first time you've heard about star forts or any of this crazy shit?
Oh, I was just telling Jen, it was probably about a year or two ago, tops.
Okay.
Yeah. We were just talking about that. That's why everyone's cracking down so hard on knowledge in social media. I mean, the Kardashians have had their own show for years and they promote bullshit. And I use them as an example, and I feel bad because they're people too, I think.
I don't
Maybe.
think so.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I
I'm just
disagree.
saying, look, for the point, they could be real people that have their own agenda and they're like, OMG, like my hair looks so gross today, or whatever they say, but it doesn't matter. They promote what they want to promote, but that's allowed. And it could be completely wrong, but nobody censors it. They're not like, she said pink was in right now, but actually black is in, so censored. Nobody fucking does that. So if someone wants to say that they believe the earth is flat, I don't know if the earth is flat or round. I actually don't give a flying fuck. But if they want to say that, people censor the shit out of that. And it's like, why? Who cares? If it's so fake, that's really what's intimidating, is why is it being censored so hard to say if you want to stand up for yourself or say that the government is wrong? People have been shitting on the government forever, like since the government, I think. So, but now it's so bad that they're going to rip your Facebook account off of Facebook because you don't like Biden. There's something else going on.
Something's go ahead.
You're absolutely right. And actually, I'm going to be recording a podcast this weekend on something to that effect, that there was this guy from the KGB. His name was Yuri Bezmenov. And in the early 80s, he did an interview here in America. And what he said is that the Soviets are trying to just destroy America by bringing communism in, and they're going to let them do it to themselves. And the first step of it is called demoralization. And what they do is they get you to a point where you cannot think on your own. They can put the facts right in front of your face, but you are so stuck in your ways that it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. And that's what you're going to believe. You believe what you've been told, and that's it. And that's where we are, Jen, right? With the whole ability to critically think, they've taken it away from us because they just censor anything and say, oh, that's bad. You can't figure that out on your own, whether that's real or not. We have to tell you what's real and what's fake. Right. And that's where we are right now.
People believe it. That's what's crazy.
And just because
aren't there. Oh, God. Sorry.
No, just because it comes from a screen, it's supposed to be believable. Right. That makes it legitimate. Just because those people have $1 million studio and they come through the TV every day, I'm supposed to trust them. And that's where we are.
And
We have
that
blind
applies
faith.
to us too. Like everybody listening, don't fucking listen to us as the gospel. We don't know either. We're right with you trying to figure this shit out. We have, pictures and articles and stuff, but like go figure it out for yourself too.
We're
Like,
encouraging people to free think. I mean, there are places like in China is just as dangerous as Russia. They have camps like the Uyghur camps that I talk about all the time on our show. But
Yeah.
the Uyghur camps, they train them to not think for themselves. Where I've heard podcasts and listened to audiobooks where these people come out, they escape, and they free think while they're escaping. And then while they're escaping, beat themselves up about free thinking and then realize that they're doing that and then have to come out of that. So it's such a mind fuck. And I don't want to ever be in that position. I don't want anyone to be in that position. So just keep free thinking. Don't let them control your fucking thoughts because it's so dangerous.
which is what is happening.
And do
every
your
fucking day.
research, right? Like Joe was
Yeah,
saying,
do
do
your
your
own
research. Don't
research.
trust me. Listen, I've
Right.
looked into this stuff for hours and I know nothing. I know the surface level of this stuff. And I've researched, this stuff I've been going, the World Fair I've been over a year at. And I've really only understand Chicago right now as a, from start to finish. But go
Right.
research it. Even though I know some of this stuff, go do your own research. Like go check out these pictures. Maybe you'll find something and you can bring it to the table. Cause that's,
Yeah.
that's what this is all about. I started my podcast because I want to throw stuff out there for people. I want to bring back thinking, right? That was the whole point of my podcast is just, I'll give you some information and I want you to go do your research, right? Just don't take what we're saying as fact. Cause we could be, I know some guys that put bullshit out there just so see how far people will run with it as kind of a meter. Like, oh, look how dumb these people are. They're not even going to research it. I'm just going to put
Right.
something out there and watch you run with it.
I know, and that's
You can just watch the news and do that tomorrow.
and that's the thing. Like none of us really know what's going on. I don't think. Like, and if you have a rebuttal to anything we've said tonight, come on my show. Don't be shitty and just send me a nasty message or like leave a nasty review on Matt or come on the show.
No, if
Argue
there's like
your
a
case.
date that was
I'm
off,
down.
or if you have a fact that you want to throw in there, we are absolutely welcome to know that information.
Yeah.
But also know that what we are being told in the mainstream media and the narrative is it's just not real. It's unfortunate. It's uncomfortable to recognize and realize that, but it's true.
Yeah.
You've
We're all
been
just
lied to.
We're all in
Yeah.
the dark here. We're all trying to figure it out. And the more we come together and stop fucking focusing on Joe Biden or Trump or Breitbart, like is in our intro, just let's all figure this out together. And I don't know what's going to happen. None of us do, but we can try.
Yeah,
I
and we
mean,
don't have
maybe
the
the-
answers, right? We don't have the answers. I know
Not
less
claiming to.
now than when I started this because every time you keep digging, you unlock 2 or 3 more things and you're like, oh shit, now I got to look into those.
I know.
But if you look back, like there's no positive outcome from us, and it's very sad. But like, look at Atlantis and look at the mud floods, and I don't mean to laugh about it. I'm not trying to be like funny or silly, but there's
I
no one's come out of these situations and been like, I survived the flood. Besides, like quote unquote Noah, who is in the Bible, like that's literally it. There's no one who came out of Tartaria, Atlantis, mud floods, anything that survived. They just took people, repurposed them, and made them do their thing. I don't know how they killed everyone or what they did, but we're not on a great path. This sounds very negative, and I feel really bad. But we could be this generation that survives. We just need to rise up and figure it out.
I think we are. I think we are the generation that maybe not figures it out, but at least takes a stand for maybe the next generation to figure it out. We're laying the foundation, I guess.
I hope
Yeah.
so.
And Matt is at the forefront of that. And we thank you for coming on. Dude, you've blown my mind tonight. And I've seen a lot of this stuff already. Like the pictures you brought, the knowledge, like we're going to have a part 2. And I thank you so much for coming on like last minute. I texted you, I think yesterday, and you said, yeah, I'll totally come on and just lay this 2-hour fucking crazy shit on you. Thank you.
I don't know that much about the World's Fairs, so
Me
this was
either.
super
That's why I
interesting
wanted
for
to have
me.
him on.
Yeah.
But we'll have to go into Star Forts next time, and what was the other one? Star forts, and what was the other thing you were talking
I
about?
got crystal palaces, or we can look into cathedrals too. I can start digging
Cathedrals,
into
yeah.
those more too.
Yeah.
Do all of it.
Yeah, whatever you want, dude. You're a way better researcher. I just come on here and talk to people. So that's my job. Your job is to do the research. You're welcome.
That's
we
hey,
appreciate
I'll
it,
take
though.
that. I'd rather do that. That's the fun stuff.
Oh,
I
yeah.
seriously, I've gotten into this point now where like I look forward to when I find a cool topic. Like the other day when Instagram went down, I spent like 3 hours just going through star forts, and I was like, this is the coolest shit ever. And I'm like, old me would have punched me in the face, being like, well, you're such a loser. What are you doing? But now I'm like, man. And then I woke up in the middle of the night and had like an epiphany, like, oh shit, I gotta go look something up. I'm like, no, get your ass in bed. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. You're not going to look up star forts, you idiot. But yeah, no, it's like a drug, you get on this trail of something and you just want to find an answer, especially with this stuff, because it's so mind-blowing and out there. And I don't have any answers, but I found some information. So
you got to pull that thread. And once you start pulling that thread, you can't really stop, because you can't stop until it ends somewhere. So you're going to keep pulling it. And that's all we're doing. And it seems futile, but you kind of have to, because there's questions that are not answered.
It's better than falling in line at the end of the day.
yeah,
I'll take it.
right. I mean, and I'm not going to have answers. Probably I'm never going to answer these questions, because I'm think of all the other people smarter than me that have been researching this. But hey, if I can get one little bit of information out there that other people don't have, boom, that's it. We did it.
Someone might find the answer, though. I think that's the point. There might be someone out there who will be touched by what it might not even be us. It might be someone who listens to something that we listen to, or whatever. Like
No, it's a collective thing. It's
connection in some way. Someone's gonna figure
none of
this
us are
out.
going to find the answer to any of this all by ourselves. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But
we got to get into
Totally.
the Vatican archives. That's where it's at.
Ooh.
That's where it's at.
you got to have a COVID vaccine to get in there, though.
Really?
Or not to get into the archive. Nobody's allowed in there. In order to get into the Vatican now, you have to show proof of COVID vaccination, which shows you that the Pope is the Antichrist. I rest my case.
No argument.
Right?
None.
I mean, I'm not saying he is, but I'm saying he is. Matt,
Oh, he
thank you
is.
for coming on. Pull your plug
Pleasure.
or put your plugs, whichever one it is, again.
You can find me at the Great Deception Podcast on all the different pod platforms except Podbean, because now they want me to pay, and I'm like, no. And then at the Great Deception Podcast on Instagram.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't plug your personal account, because you're totally shadow banned.
Oh, it's beyond. I've laid
I
her
hate
to
tagging.
rest.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's crazy. And I didn't even do anything. I didn't get anything, any strikes or anything. I got a couple of those little COVID things on the bottom of the post, but I never got like a warning. And then all of a sudden my posts went from like, 50 likes to like 2. And then I went to go, when I started my podcast Instagram, I went to go follow myself, and I got this pop-up message that says, are you sure you want to follow this person? They are known to spread false information. I was like, oh man, they got me.
Oh my God.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
so gross. All right, we can
So
talk
follow
about this
his-
off air, but
At
hang
the Great
out.
Deception
after we're done.
Podcast on Instagram. Go follow his show. He's got some bangers up already. I look forward to every time you put out an episode, because I'm looking to learn. Our show is for entertainment and maybe learning,
We
but I'm looking to learn. I learn something every episode. It's
Now you
crazy.
guys are the best of both worlds, man. You get the entertainment and the fun. I'm more like PBS. I'm just bringing you the boring, straight information.
You're way better than PBS, dude. No way.
Oh my God, yeah. But anyway, Matt, thank you again.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
everybody in the chat, for joining us. We appreciate you all. There was a lot of you out there tonight. Oh my God. This is probably the biggest audience we've ever had live so far, and we appreciate it. Anyway, Matt, have a good
Thanks,
night.
guys.
Everyone in the
Thanks,
chat,
Matt.
have a good night.
Thank you, guys.
And we will see you Sunday for the shit show.